Hi, everyone, and welcome to No Boundaries, the podcast, the mother and daughter edition, where we, a mother and daughter duo, discuss controversial topics and while also exploring our bonds. Well, as you can see, I'm the mother, and my name is Anusha.
I'm the daughter, and my name is Lulu.
Yes. And today we're going to talk about parenting and freedom. I'm a very free parent, and I gave my kids a lot of freedom from a pretty young age. And we're going to discuss, was that good? Was that bad? Should I have set more boundaries? How did it affect my children? And of course, how did it affect Lulu? And what you or other parents can do different or learn from it. That's what we're going to discuss. So let's first put a little bit in context how I see free parenting, right? Okay, I don't know if you've heard it before in other episodes, but I raised my children mostly in the Netherlands. We moved here to New York from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, when Lulu was, my oldest daughter was, you were 17.
I was 15.
Sorry, you were 15. God, so long already. You were 15 and I had a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old when we moved here. Right? And you were already in the Netherlands in high school. Because in the Netherlands, you start high school young at like 12, 13. So your middle school in America is our high school already. Okay, so that's for context. And I was raised in Amsterdam. Amsterdam, as maybe some of you know, is a very free-spirited city where a lot is allowed. And even though I was raised by a Russian mother, Russian white mom, and a Cameroonian, West African, black father, they divorced when I was young. I was raised mostly by my mom and a step parent. He was also Dutch, white. They gave me a lot of freedom also because Amsterdam is just a very free city, especially me growing up in the 80s as a teenager. Oh, that was, parents didn't even know where we were most of the time. And my mom always instilled in me that I trust you. I trust you to make the right choices. So even if I would say to her, like on a Thursday night or a school night, oh, I really want to go to this party, but I promise I'll go to school next day, she'd be like, okay, as long as your grades are good and I can tell you're not a hardcore, in the Netherlands, heroin was a big problem. You're not a heroin addict. You can do what you want, basically. That was sort of that was the limit, as long as I didn't use any heroin. So, I had a lot of freedom. I went out a lot. I partied a lot. I stayed over at people and we had no cell phones, nothing. My mom didn't even know where I was, but she trusted me and I did really well in school. So that was sort of like how I also saw freedom. Like I want my kids to at least do good in school, do some sports, do some educational stuff and don't go completely crazy. And I'll notice if they go completely crazy. So that's kind of how I viewed it. So how I see free parenting is like my mom did with me. You have to really trust your children. And of course it depends also on the child. But with my kids, I was lucky that I could feel like, listen, let me just talk about Lulu because she's here with me, right? So with Lulu, I could tell from a young age, I can trust this girl. She knows what she's doing. She's good at, at looking around her, at making friends, at looking at life. So I can tell, like, just like my mom did with me, I can trust her to make really good, not always perfect, but decent decisions. Plus, knowing how life is, I know at some point, almost any child will experiment, will do certain things, will make mistakes. And I've also learned a child has a right to make their mistakes, right? It's their life, they have a right to make mistakes. And most important is that they feel safe enough to always come to you if things go wrong, if things go too far, and that they feel free enough to experiment also and not feel judged, at least a little bit, not maybe in the house, but in your aura, in your sort of presence, right? So that way, if something goes wrong or it's not going well, we're all there to kind of navigate it and talk about it as a family, as parents, as mother and daughter. So does that make sense how I see it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's how I see free parenting. So I'm not talking about neglectful parenting where you just let your child do whatever you want so you can do whatever you want. I want to be very clear about that. That's the distinction, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like growing up with my mom and dad, they were very present. It wasn't at all like they just didn't care what I was up to on a daily basis. But I think they were always very like, for example, very sex positive. They were always very educational on these topics from a young age. And even the age where we were like, ew, ill sex or ill drugs, they were still always very honest and open about it. And even if we got embarrassed, they still sometimes had these conversations. And now looking back, I'm happy they did, because it allowed me to know that when you do get in those like teenage years and you start experimenting with things, or friends start experimenting, like there's this shame with it where you feel like you can't go to your parents about it. But I never felt that, or this fear because of how they might react. But I never experienced that because I knew how much they talked to us about it and how they always were very positive in an educational manner, like always. And they always said, for example, with weed, if you ever want to try it, just let us know, and like you can try it at home or with us, because it's like they'd rather have you try it safely than going behind their back and doing it elsewhere where it might not be safe product or safe circumstances, and then you can't go to your parents about it. So I think it's more the sense of course, they always educated us that these things are not necessarily good, but if you do really feel like you need to do it here where we can help you and be there step by step. And same went for like sexually exploring things. Like they were always like, you can bring the person over in the house. Like they don't want us to sneak to some random neighborhood and like do things at like unsafe locations, etc. Because I think the most important aspect, like my mom said, is that like your kids are gonna get to a certain age where they're going to experiment, and no matter how strict you are and how much you are against it, if they feel that need to experience, they're gonna find a way. When there's a will, there's a way. They're gonna find somehow to get it and to do it, and that way they're only gonna hide it from you. And if they do have certain like problems with certain like products, like they could be like more sensitive to addiction, etc., then you might not find out until it's already too late. And that's exactly what my parents wanted to prevent, so that it would never get to that point. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that way of being raised. And on top of that, it also, there's this thing that when you're a certain age, like a lot of my like age mates around 13, 14 were very excited to start drinking and doing drugs, and then they had to go home and pretend to their parents that they didn't do all that and lie. And that also made it way more exciting to do so. And for me, since I never grew up where I had to hide it, it was also generally a lot less exciting for me to try it out. There was less of a need to try these things because I didn't have to like sneak around and hide for it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very good to hear, because of course that was a risk we took.
Yeah.
We also trusted a little bit like on our own genetics, right? My husband and I are both not very prone to like, you know, we don't have like extreme addiction drama in our family, so that made it also a little bit easier. That could be completely different if that's, you know, different in your family or in your family history. Also, of course, I just wanted to make sure that you know that in Amsterdam, weed has been legal for a long, like since I was a teenager. So it's very different, of course, from, you know, the United States, although now it's very legal in a lot of states. So for us, we knew, you know, in the Netherlands, it's called coffee shops where people buy weed. They're often really close to schools, even like in neighborhoods. Like literally where you went to school, like opposite was like a very big, like famous coffee shop. Mm-hmm. So you know that once your kids go out to school, they're gonna, you know, they're gonna get at least see it and be introduced to it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you have to take little risks with that. And speaking about, you know, sexual education, I think it's very, very important for children to feel safe, to know their boundaries, to also know that they can always come to you if things are not, you know, if they don't like something, or they don't feel confident, or they're afraid or something. I want them never ever, for me it was the most important thing, to never ever feel ashamed, whatever ever happens. And I always try to teach them what I watched as a young child on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Just because something feels nice physically doesn't mean, you know, that you like it emotionally, that you're ready for something emotionally, and that it's all conflicting and that it can be confusing. That's important to be open and talk about it, right? And to always come to me, whatever ever happens. I want it to be completely safe, and plus also for their health, because you don't, you know, things can happen. Horrible, you know, diseases, or, you know, God forbid what can happen. And I want to, you know, we always wanted to be there to help for the children to feel safe and, take appropriate, how do you say, measurements.
Yeah, I think the main focus with this is, of course, in our household, we believe sex to be a positive thing. Obviously, we don't think drugs are positive. So I think whether they're positive or negative things, the most important aspect that my parents focus on, that I believe in as well, is the education around it. Like, I think if you don't want your child to do certain drugs, I think it could be more beneficial to educate them on the drugs and that they know exactly what they're doing and what they're putting into their body. And that way it's really like their choice if they still want to do that. And I think instead of saying like, don't do that, it will be more beneficial to educate them on what exactly it is that they're doing. And I learned about that in my philosophy class as well, how it's like in native philosophy, it's very, their parenting is all about teaching the risks that come or the consequences that come with your actions rather than teaching them how to do it or what to do. And there was this example of these kids that were jumping on the bed and the dad came in, and instead of getting mad that they were jumping on the bed, he instead showed them how the bed was made and how fragile it was and how easily they could get hurt. And then he just walked out. And after that, it was their decision whether or not they still wanted to jump on the bed. And they knew that if they did still jump on the bed and hurt themselves, it would be more their responsibility and more their fault. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and speaking on that, I think it's interesting what you say, because your dad, my husband, he is a neuropsychiatrist, and we spoke about it a lot, because raising our children, of course, I was worried also a little bit raising children in Amsterdam, which is such a free city where it's so normal from a really young age to go out all night, especially on weekends, to spend nights at friends. It's completely normal to have sleepovers with multiple kids, in different houses without sometimes even knowing the parents, or just met them, a few times somewhere in school, especially from a high school age, which again starts really young. And because kids just take their bike and go, but what he said is it's very important to offer your children a healthy alternative, to show children that life is worth living, that there's enough to do without partying, right? That you have a happy life, that the kids play sports, that the kids have fun things to do, that the kids have friendships, family, that they do good in school, that you support them in that, to offer them all the other possibilities. Because of course, if kids are just bored, there's nothing else to do, the easiest thing is, and nobody is there to educate you, or you're afraid to speak about it, you don't want to, you don't want to burden your parents, or parents are afraid to bring up the wrong subject with their kids, then you grow out away from each other, and things can go wrong, especially with a lot of hardworking parents. I've noticed people I know that work so hard that it's not that they, don't want to look after their children amazingly, but they just, have to put a lot of time in work and in surviving. So this is not about blaming or saying how things should be done. I know I speak from a position of privilege for having that space, having that time, and having that possibility. But that's to be involved in your children's life is of course, it's a beautiful luxury.
Yeah, I agree. And that reminds me that I once saw this very interesting TED Talk about addiction and the harms of addiction. But it was interesting because he was talking about why the drug addiction rates are a lot higher in, for example, America versus Europe, and why there's way more deaths and overdose in America versus in Europe. And he said it as well. Quality of life is the most important factor in this. Like, if you have a lot more to live for, then you're less likely to want to resort to substances and harmful substances, because the stakes are a lot higher, because that means there's a lot of things that you're doing in your day-to-day life that you won't be able to do anymore if you're doing drugs. So, yeah.
And I've worried about that, and especially because, again, we moved here when you were 15.
Yeah.
And of course, you had to make new friends and find a life here. And this is a very different city, like almost, 50 times bigger than Amsterdam. And that was very stressful. I wanted to ask you, how did you experience that change? Because you had a lot of independence, right? At 14, 15,
Yeah.
13 even in Amsterdam. And then you came here. How was that freedom thingy? How did that change when you was a teenager here?
It didn't change at all. The only difference is that I was around way more people with extremely strict parents, and I watched these same people with the strict parents only feel more of a need to do all these things behind their parents' back, because there's also this thing where when you do reach a more independent age, you're more prone to already want to rebel against your parents and find them annoying and want to move out. Like, that's a natural reaction to becoming a teen. So that, in a combination with them telling you how to live, it's only going to make them want to do exactly those things that they tell you not to do, if that makes sense. So yeah, and I watched my friends having the strictest parents, and all these big fears that the parents had about their children were exactly what the children were doing. So it just shows there's like only a certain amount of control you have over your kids when they do reach a certain age, and you have to learn to let go, which is very hard. And when you're younger, of course, do the best you can to keep them clean and healthy. But at a certain age, you also have this weird thing where it's not really in your control anymore, and you can't tell them anymore how they should be living.
Yeah. It's so interesting what you say, because I've been in therapy, and one of my biggest fears, of course, is letting your children go, and especially when we decided to move to New York City. And yeah, I'll never forget that my therapist said, like, again, I said that before, but I just want to reiterate that your children have a right to make mistakes, and it's not something you can control, and that's something you can't also enforce not to happen. It's you don't have that right, even though you're the parents.
You want your kids to be perfect.
Yes, and was interesting that my therapist said if you want your kids to be perfect, don't tell, show, and
Exactly.
focus on yourself. How can you how perfect are you? So that was so interesting to think about these things, because it's so easy to just say how the next generation should be better. I mean, I know I've done that a lot. Said things.
Yeah.
Are there, I want you to be really honest. Are there things that where you feel now that you're older, right? You're 21. I mean, you're still really young, but looking back at from the age of 15, where we maybe gave you too much freedom?
No, I don't think that you guys gave me too much freedom. I think with you specifically, there were some situations where you contradicted yourself, because all these things we're just talking about are true. That's genuinely how my mom raised me and taught to raise me, except there were certain times when those things happened and she was not happy about it, or she was pretty strict on it, or she did all of a sudden get a little angry, which was confusing because it was cool when you were educating me, but now that it's actually happening, it's not cool anymore.
I get that. Yeah. No, that's true. It's because, emotions come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah. And stress reaction, my stress reaction, it's also a little cultural. I have a Russian mom. So, shouting is just part of our, my culture, my Russian culture.
Yeah.
When I get stressed, I shout.
Yeah.
If we were living in Italy or France, you would also shout. You would just shout back. Or Russia.
I think, to put it vaguely, like, for example, certain things with weed, for example, when I tried weed, or when I started having sex, I think with those things, and specifically when I did come to you about it, I think a lot of times you did get very like, oh, but you have to be careful with this, and there's that, and you need to do this, and make sure you do that. And I think that can get really overwhelming, and that would make me kind of be like, uh-oh, like, did I not make the right decision to go to her? But luckily, my mom has as quick as her stress reaction comes, it also goes. And later on, we can talk normal and like laugh. But at first, she does have that little mother instinct where she's like, oh my gosh. Because easier said than done. It's so easy to say this is how you should raise your kid. But you don't actually know how you're going to react until it actually indeed happens.
Yeah.
And I think with my sister and brother, when they came to her with these things, it was way more relaxed. Like, obviously, I'm the oldest child. So I'm like the test bunny, you know?
Yes, the test bunny, yeah. No, it's very, I mean, I just always look at you and see my baby, you know? See that innocent, like, first time I held you in my arms. So it's just so difficult to separate that from who you are now. Even now that you're 21 and you live on your own still, I mean, it's always, yeah. But yeah, we tried. Well, my mom was actually, my mom would shout all the time, but she also gave me a lot of freedom. So contradiction was also something I was used to. So I was very good at navigating and knowing what to say and what not to say. But I always knew with my mom, whatever, I mean, if when shit hits the fan, I can go to my mom. I always knew that.
Yeah.
That was, I remember once, and I'm not afraid to be open about that. It is a little bit of a trigger warning. I once had somebody put something in my drink, and it was somebody who I knew. And
I didn't even know this.
Yeah, somebody, I knew that person, and I was flirting with that person. And I wanted to do drugs with him. I wanted to do ecstasy with that person. But I think he also did something in my drink, because I don't even remember how I got home. And the only thing I know is that I woke up the next day naked. And I don't know how I know. Maybe I remember him coming home with me, but I know he was with me at some point in my apartment. So I woke up the next day, and that was like this like horrible, scary feeling. And I was already grown up. I was living on my own. I was in my 20s. And I didn't call a friend. I called my mom, because I knew the person who I can call now is my mom. And I'm so grateful for that I could call her right away. She came to my apartment right away. She sat with me, and she went to the clinic with me, because the first thing I wanted to do is do a test. I'm from the 80s, so was really raised with a lot of fear for venereal disease, and especially AIDS. Like, in my days, it was a death sentence, and I've lost friends. So there was a friend, this was like early 90s. So I went with her to the clinic, and the only person I wanted to do that with was with her. So that to have that bond with my mom, and of course later she shouted at me when the test results, and then you had to wait like for 2-3 weeks. I'll never forget that how important that is. Sorry, Lulu, did I how was that to hear this story?
No, I'm just sorry for you that happened, of course.
Okay, I thought I told you.
I think you told me about going to the clinic with your mom, but you didn't tell me that you got laced and you didn't remember anything.
Okay.
Yeah,
it happened.
I'm sorry about that. Fluffy's coming to hug her.
Yes, Fluffy always. This is my cat, Fluffy, our youngest cat, and she always knows
when she's sad.
when I'm sad. Okay, but so things happen. Life is scary, and that's what I always think as a mom.
Yeah, I think if your kids do come to you with something very shocking or dangerous that is obviously not what you want for your child, especially if it's something you had no idea they were doing and they might have been hiding it for months, I think when they do finally come to you, your first reaction should never be to be angry at them or to tell them what to do or to take legal action. Like, at first you should just be there for them, because the fact that they're coming to you, that already takes so much. It's so hard. Like, your parents, you want to be there for your parents. You look up to them, and the last thing you want is to disappoint your parents. So if somebody does come to their parents, just know that that's they're finally coming to you. It's a good thing, and just hug them, hold them, and be there for them. Of course, legal action needs to be taken at some point, or you need to also teach them a lesson. And of course, you might have to take legal action, or you might have to be annoyed with them and tell them how it was wrong what they did, or educate them and raise them, because you are their parent at the end of the day. We're not saying you should just be like fine, whatever, but at first hold them, hug them, let them know they're safe, and thank them for coming to you and that they did the right thing. And then the next day, or when things calm down, that's when you can like
then you can shout.
That's when you can start thinking about the actions or the consequences. Like, the most important thing is that your child is safe, so be there for them first, and then you can worry about the consequences after. Like, and that's like, again, easier said than done. Of course, you're so protected. Like, if something bad happens to your kid, the first thing you want to do is find who did it, do this, do that, yell at them, make sure they never scare you like that again, of course. But you have to put yourself in their shoes, and at first they just need to be held and know they have somebody taking care of them. They don't need to be in these situations.
Yeah. As an actress, I worked a lot also in behavioral training for like offices and people, and in professional circuits. In the Netherlands, that's like a normal thing where people get trained. And one of the exercises we always used about that, like if like a little child, like a 3-year-old, is like biking on a little tricycle, and then the bicycle falls and the child falls and it comes to you and it has like bruised knees and it's crying, you would never say, oh wait a minute, what happened? Where was the tricycle? Where were you riding on your tricycle? Why? I told you not. That's like a natural instinct with like a small child. You just hold them right away. And first you make sure they're not in too much pain. Oh, let's have a glass of water. And let's look at your bruises. And then maybe later on you'll ask like, what happened? Where's the tricycle? Did somebody push you or whatever, right? So that's always a good exercise to give yourself, when your child is coming to you like, Mom, I need to talk to you. Something happened. Okay, think of that 2-3-year-old on the tricycle before, like me, you react emotionally. So, that's my lesson.
And I think there's been times where I came to you specifically about things when they were already too late, or I've hid things from my mom for longer than I should have sometimes. And I think part of you must have been upset and had a question like, why did you not tell me? Or why didn't you come to me right away?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, it's a mixture, because I want to protect, I want to help, I want to be there. So, in conclusion, mistakes happen. Emotions always, creep in. That's okay. You can always, that's what we always learn to people in training, you can also correct yourself. And I think that's what you said. I try to always do that with you, right? I'm sorry, I did that wrong. Can we start again? Or, let's try this conversation again. Or I apologize, okay. Right? To correct yourself. So even during the conversation.
Like if you react
even during
angry at first.
Exactly. Even during your emotional reaction, you can also then, correct, let's take a step back. I'm sorry. Let's start again. Verbalize what you're going through and, apologize and verbalize. Explain, but apologize.
Yeah. I just think one topic we do need to address.
Yeah.
Well, first of all of this that we're talking about is our experience growing up and what worked for us. We're not in any way trying to tell you guys how to raise your kid. No, Keyword, your kid. I don't even have kids. This is just a lot of my friends and people around me are so surprised by how open I was raised and how I can talk to my mom about all these things. And even when I was younger, I knew way more about sexual education than any of my friends. And it was because of this woman over here. So we're just talking about what worked for us, and it's surprising for a lot of people to hear. So it's more just like sharing our experience. But I think another thing that we do need to address, that although there's a lot of freedom, there's always a boundary at some point, there's always a limit. And I guess, how do you decide? Like, you let me go party and smoke and drink, and you let me go out, but it's like, when do you step in? Like, obviously, you wouldn't want me to go all the way.
We stepped in with you at some point when you were like 15, 16. we said that's it, because your school was not going well. You were also not happy in your school. There were different reasons, but we wanted to address those. If you're not happy in your school, or if this is not the path you want to, maybe you want to change schools or whatever, which in the Netherlands is easier, then we need to talk about that. So, sorry, you were 15 when we moved here, so it happened like a 13, 14, pretty young, that we also decided after a year, like, this is not going well.
Okay.
So you were not allowed sleepovers anymore, and you were not allowed to go to parties during the week. But it's so-and-so's birthday and it's on a Thursday. No. And less sleepovers. So that's how we really set our limits with you.
But isn't that contradicting what we just said about freedom? Like, how's this different?
No, there's a boundary because you were lacking in school. You were not doing well in school. You were late. You were not showing up to things. You would promise you would be there, or would come late, or try to, sneak away. Or
like,
excuses.
it started to impact my life.
It started to impact your life, and also, our family life.
And our bond.
And our bond, yeah. And I could see you were not happy. Because you were also, because I know you love, you were young, but you liked also school. You're a smart child, and I could tell that you were not finding your place anymore intellectually also.
Yeah.
So that was.
But how would you have dealt with it if I was rebelling and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go and live in my friend's house and do my own thing, like.
Well, you can't if you're a minor, so no, that would not happen. That would not be. But yeah, at a certain point, if you're...
You do need to step in.
Yeah, you need to step in. But at some point, if you're not a minor anymore... So, for instance, if, in the Netherlands, if you're 18 and you don't want to go... I mean, in the Netherlands, it's pretty strict. You need, before you can even get a job or something, you need some form of education. You cannot be... in the Netherlands, like, quote unquote, a high school dropout. That's just, then you can't do anything. You can't even get a job in a supermarket, right? So you need some kind of basic education, which kind of helps, I guess. Again, quality of life. But yeah, at some point, that didn't happen with you. I have friends who had to make that difficult decision. And I have one dear friend who even said to her child, like, listen, there's two options. If you want to stay home, you're or going to go to school or get a job. If that's not what you want, then I'm bringing you to shelter tonight, this evening in the Netherlands, right? So it's different shelters from here. And
so more like a rehab center.
No, a shelter. Oh. Like, you're on your own, right? And this child was defiant and was like, F you and shelter it is. And the parents, even though they were divorced, they said, okay, pack your bags. And they brought the child to the shelter and dropped the child off at the shelter.
And did he come back, or?
It took a while. A while.
But he turned around eventually.
And again, they offered all the alternatives. They said, you are welcome at home always if you work or go to school.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. So basically you're saying that if their ambitions or their path in life is going the way they want, to not be too strict, but if their life starts like going downhill, that's when it's time to step in and be more strict.
Yeah, and even at a young age. So for you, we did it like 14, 15,
Yeah, and I think it's also this thing where you can't really control if your kids are going to do certain substances or have certain experiences, but you can like ask them to like go to school or at least get a job or pay part of the rent in the house or provide like some kind of structure in their life. And a lot of times with those kind of structures, you can't afford to party every day or do substances all the time anyway. So I guess that's also a way to like little reverse psychology, like motivating them with school or work, which is kind of a way to actually get them to do less drugs and parties.
Which is not easy, right? I've had, sleepless nights.
Yeah.
So it's not easy, but yeah. And of course you make mistakes too. Of course, again, but you try to correct, you try to live, you try to... I think as parents, you should be very hard on yourself and you should not be hard on yourself, right? It's always this this balance of being, involved, emotional, worried, stressed out, and discussing it, if not with your partner, if you're a single parent, with friends, with people you trust, with, your community, religious community, cultural, social community. It's very easy to think you're stuck on your own. and there's sometimes more support and help than you might think. I've noticed if I speak to friends, if I open up, even if your father and I didn't agree on certain things, and I would speak to my friends, and it would be so good to at least open up and talk and listen to other perspectives, and also the perspectives of like, let them go, or they have a right to experiment. It's a journey. It's a never-ending
It's
journey.
a never-ending conversation, and there's so many layers, and easier said than done always with everything. But I think, again, it's important to focus on educating about the harms, but also the positives.
Yeah.
And like, again, we view like exploring sexual relationships, we view that as a good thing and part of life. But it's still important to educate on the dangers that come with that as well.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And then it's about emotional readiness too. Mm-hmm. There's physical side, but there's also emotional, and growing up and being mentally and emotionally ready for something.
Mm-hmm.
And that all needs to be discussed, in my opinion. Yeah. So we want to know what your opinion is. Please, listen to this podcast, like and subscribe. We're on all platforms. Please, send us a positive review. It's very important for us as independent podcasters to get positive reviews, to get followers. And please let us know what you think. If there's any topics you want us to discuss, any controversies, and please your reactions to this topic, how you see it, if you do it differently, or if you have something to add to this, because I think this is a conversation we can have again.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to your opinion as well.
Yeah, and I know there's probably a lot of parts that we're missing, and there's also a lot of experiences that we aren't familiar with, because we had a pretty smooth ride with this way of parenting, but it could also go the opposite way. So we'd love to learn from people's experiences, different ways of parenting, what worked for you, what didn't work for you. Like, we always love about learning of other people's experiences like growing up. And yeah, please let us know topics you want us to discuss. Yeah, it could be anything. We have no embarrassment, no shame. Nothing is too far. Like, we will talk about anything.
Hey, thank you, and see you next week.
Bye bye.